Those of you who are my age or maybe a little bit older might remember the irreverent phrase popularized by Ronald Reagan, who said, "The 9 most terrifying words in the English language are, 'I'm from the government and I'm here to help.'" That joke highlighted a perception of government as an incompetent agent that mismanages situations, makes things worse, and ultimately fails to deliver. It highlights the conservative and libertarian critique of big government's failure to solve social problems and become their cause or make things worse. This expectation can quickly lead to distrust in government authority. And finally, and most relevant for my message today, the unintended and unexpected consequences of government intervention in policies. Despite having good intentions, those interventions can have unforeseen and negative side effects. I never liked that joke because I grew up with the idea that government is a needed agent to address social problems like racism, worker exploitation, poverty, and environmental damage. Environmental damage due to power structures that are built for capitalism and extractive industries for the benefit of the wealthy, not for labor, the common or marginalized person, or the natural world, all of them suffering exploitation. That idea that government can be the agent of beneficial social change has roots in 19th century liberal Protestant thinking that I'd like to bring before you today. Government control of civil society has its roots, strangely enough, in the concept of manifest destiny. The term manifest destiny was coined by, unfortunately, a conservative propagandist for the Confederacy, John O'Sullivan, in 1845. It expressed a widely held American belief at the time that the foundation of the nation was divinely ordained. America had a special destiny among nations. It had a mission to spread democracy and Western civilization to the American continent. And when that was completed, to the world, it provided American imperialism with a moral and religious justification for pushing west to the Pacific, displacing indigenous peoples, and incorporating Mexican territories. Once the continent was conquered, the expansionist impulse didn't stop. It shifted, though. It shifted from territorial expansion to a civilizational mission. Toward the end of the 19th century, the question became, what do we do with our power now that we've reached the Pacific? Manifest destiny found theological grounding in evangelical Protestantism. Christians were driven by their faith to convert the heathen and spread true, red, not Catholic, Christianity. But as liberal Protestantism gained influence, particularly among educated urban elites, their framework shifted. Rather than converting the heathen, they stressed education. Rather than focus on saving souls for the church, they wanted to enculturate the natives with Western civilization. Rather than piety depended on subservience to the church, another knock on Catholicism, they advocated for individual progress and development. Finally, rather than emotional revivalism, they favored a rational approach to Christianity. Now, Unitarians and to some degree Universalists were important in these motivations. Their ministers and leaders provided a progressive, enlightened version of American exceptionalism that justified imperialism. They had the theological advantage of rejecting predestination. This meant people's character could be improved through education and moral reform that could extend to perfecting society too. Their universalist ethics meant that they had a duty to extend their faith to all humanity who have inherent worth and value that their current overlords might not appreciate. The Unitarian rational orientation justified seeing irrational cultures as inferior. This is where the justification for American exceptionalism starts taking a much more racist and elitist turn in the latter quarter of the 19th century. Darwin's discovery of natural selection, independent of divine direction, opened the door for scientific racism to replace religious destiny as the motivation for conquest. So-called social Darwinism became the justification for Anglo-Saxon racist superiority. Anthropologists of the time found justifications for their theories of cultural evolution from savages to the civilized. Enlightened scientists could be trusted with managing society and making more efficient allocations of resources. They developed a belief in progress, famously proclaimed by James Freeman Clarke as onward and upward forever. Liberal religious leaders, like the Unitarians, could embrace a scientific approach to progress while maintaining moral language of duty and uplift. So how did all those on the receiving end of all this benevolence feel about it? Not so good. An egregious example of this was the Indian schools. The motto of Richard Henry Pratt, another religious liberal, not Unitarian, thankfully, of the Carlisle Indian Industrial School of 1879 his motto was, "Kill the Indian, save the man." Many liberal Protestants and other reformers of those days genuinely believed they were helping indigenous children by forcibly assimilating them. I'm ashamed to count. This thinking is part of our Unitarian heritage. Samuel Atkins Elliott, who served as president of the American Unitarian Association from 1900 to 1927, in 1909 was appointed by President Taft to the Board of Indian Commissioners. In a speech titled "From the Scalping Knife to the Can Opener," Elliott argued how only assimilation to white culture could save Native Americans from their own barbarism. Elliott believed that liberal Christianity was an appropriate vehicle for teaching Unitarian theories of character development. He believed the Native American, quote, must be first trained to strength of will and steadiness of purpose. He must become accustomed to participate in the life of a community with acts under moral ideas. Two other nations suffered this kind of imperialism after the Western United States was settled, were Hawaii and the Philippines. What is critical for our balanced reflection on our institutional heritage is appreciating the good these liberal Protestants thought they were doing. And many of them were Unitarians. Protestant missionaries had come to Hawaii in the 1820s to spread their forms of Puritan-inspired Christianity. As with the Western United States, they came to bring civilization. They believed they were saving the souls of the native peoples. They built schools and hospitals and increased literacy. By the 1850s, they had Christianized the islands and at the same time suppressed the native language of Hula and systematically dismantled their indigenous culture and political system. In Hawaii, these missionaries weren't just cheerleaders for economic development for the people, they were often the primary agents of it. In 1848, missionaries influenced land reform that introduced private property, that allowed foreigners to purchase land. This fundamentally restructured Hawaiian society and transferred vast territories to white settlers, many from missionary families who became Hawaii's economic and political elite. The famous saying captures it: they came to do good, and they did very well. By the 1890s, missionary families controlled vast sugar plantations and dominated commerce. Stanford Dole, son of missionary parents and devout Christian, led the 1893 overthrow of Queen Liliuokalani and became president of the provincial government. He explicitly framed annexation in terms of bringing American Christian civilization to the islands. Even though missionaries had successfully converted most native Hawaiians to Christianity, including the royal family, by the 1850s, the narrative persisted that they needed American guidance. The argument shifted from religious conversion to economic and political uplift. Liberal religious voices argued that the overthrow of the Hawaiian monarchy would protect the progress missionaries had brought, education, literacy, modern governance, from potential backsliding or foreign, particularly Japanese, influence. None of this worked out well for the Hawaiians. Queen Liliuokalani herself was a devout Christian who composed hymns and saw no contradiction between Christianity and Hawaiian sovereignty. She appealed to Christian principles of justice in protesting the overthrow. Native Hawaiian Christians found themselves in the impossible position, converted to Christianity by missionaries whose descendants now dispossessed them of their land and sovereignty. The conquest of the Philippines after the Spanish-American War is an even clearer project of benevolent colonization full of good intentions. It was different, however, because Protestant missionaries weren't displacing indigenous religions. The islands had been converted to Catholicism hundreds of years ago. Not only that, the Filipinos had already declared independence and established a republic. American benevolent intervention meant dismissing these aspirations, leading to the brutal Philippine-American War from 1899 to 1902 that killed hundreds of thousands of Filipinos. This period was also the heyday of the social gospel movement that influenced many of our congregations and continues its influence today. They framed this imperialist enterprise as humanitarian work. Figures like Josiah Strong argued that Anglo-Saxon Protestant civilization had a duty to uplift backward races. This wasn't the fire and brimstone evangelicalism of conservatives, but rather a supposedly enlightened mission to bring modern education, sanitation, democracy, and rational Christianity, rescuing Filipinos from superstitious, feudal, tradition-bound Catholicism. Liberal theologian Lyman Abbott argued Filipinos were children who needed American tutelage. He framed colonialism as an extension of Christian charity and social reform that aligned with the mission of the social gospel movement. This was their chance to bring true Christianity and modern civilization to the Philippines. Are you recognizing, I hope, the insidious nature of their self-righteous paternalism? Unlike openly racist imperialists, liberal clergy genuinely believed they were helping. They supported anti-imperialist causes at home while backing expansion abroad. They advocated for workers' rights domestically while supporting exploitation of Filipino resources. And they preached brotherhood while treating Filipinos as perpetual children needing guidance. Liberal religious leaders in the United States played a significant and often contradictory role in supporting Philippine colonialization, revealing how progressive theology could align with imperialism. Let me also say there were theological liberals on the margins who protested imperialism, notably the Anti-Imperialist League. Moorfield Story, a Unitarian and president of the Anti-Imperialist League, framed opposition to in both constitutional and moral terms, arguing that empire building corrupted American democracy and violated Christian principles of human equality. Edward Everett Hale, famous Unitarian minister and chaplain of the U.S. Senate, was an active member of the Anti-Imperialist League. Though he had supported the Spanish-American War, he opposed the subsequent annexation of the Philippines, viewing it as a betrayal of American Republican principles. And Williams Jennings Bryant, who was a devout Presbyterian layman, who vehemently opposed imperialism on both Christian and democratic grounds. He argued that forced subjugation contradicted the gospel message. I hope you're getting a taste of how liberally religious leaders were complicit in imperialism. Their strategies in the West and Hawaii, followed by the takeover in the Philippines, show how benevolence can be even more effective at colonization than open conquest, because it comes wrapped in the cloak of genuine care, making resistance seem like ingratitude and cultural preservation seem like backwardness. I wonder if this kind of liberal elitism is still active in our congregations and in today's political climate. Maybe the rough edges have been smoothed over the years, but I wonder if populism, the populism that Trump has created as a base, has in it a reaction to the educated, scientific, rational perspective of expert elites who claim to have the critical answers to our civilizational problems. Distrust in those expert answers came up powerfully during COVID. That distrust undermined the foundations of professional public health guidance. And perhaps that distrust of experts in their fields is the source of some of the oppositional energy when considering issues like climate change, green energy investments, protecting endangered species, and getting vaccinated to protect the whole world at potential personal risk. For these last 40 years, I know Unitarian Universalist ministers have been working hard to root out benevolent elitism in ourselves and in our congregations, especially as it shows up as racism. Unitarian Universalism has built into it a deep trust in individuals to know what is best for them. We do not impose beliefs on people because we reject theological imperialism. We are creating as best we can a non-authoritarian approach to religion. We are open to truth and wisdom that comes from both ancient European cultures, the Middle East, Asia, Africa, indigenous cultures of the Americas. We want to know these truths through experience and test them, as Emerson put it, pass through the fire of thought. We balance the importance of the use of the mind, of reason and religion with the passion that guides and moves our hearts. So as we consider the great genocidal damage done by colonizing Europeans to indigenous Americans on this reimagined anti-holiday on Monday, let us ponder whether benevolent elitist intentions continue to move in our minds and hearts. May we consider using the tools of anti-racism work, like the ones that Zach was talking about, that Thursday class with Dr. Natalie Edmond. These tools are powerful ways to look for its presence in our motivations and in our actions. This is hard work to do this internal reflection, but as we do it, there is liberatory freedom available. May we find it.